Let's
Hey
go,
guys,
baby.
let's go. As usual, it's awesome to see both of you. So we're sitting here, just the three of us, chatting about our findings from Google Next, and thought we're just going to record it and see where we go with this. So I'm going to kick this thing off and just say who I am. I'm John Kingsup. I'm in this cloud go-to-market space for a long time. Been working with Brian Denker for quite a number of years, and super passionate about cloud go-to-market, and been riding these digital transformation waves for over a decade. Mostly alliances or sales leadership roles. So Amin, why don't you give a quick intro for you?
Alliances at Jump Cloud, but I've been doing this alliances thing or this partnership thing before it was absolutely cool. It went under like all these different names. It was like partner enablement, sales enablement, SE stuff. But generally always operating within this wild ecosystem of partners. So uncool, but super engaged with
Two-time tackle customer, I believe, as well, which is cool.
Two-time. Keep coming back.
maybe three. Exactly.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And I love the idea of partnerships are cool. We're getting there. We're getting there.
At least we think they're cool.
They will drive revenue. Yeah. All right, BD.
Yeah. Hey, folks, how you doing?
Who doesn't?
The tackle co-founder, been doing this stuff since marketplaces weren't really cool. 2016 got the thing going with some kind of fun ideas around changing the way people buy software with the clouds, and it was an experiment to start, and now it's pretty mainstream, and now it's a massive channel, worth billions and billions of dollars every quarter even, right? We're thinking $25 to $30 billion this year in total revenue going through the marketplaces. So pretty amazing stuff, and there's a lot more to it these days. So yeah, be kind of fun to chat about some of the things that happened over in Vegas at Google Next. So
I love that idea, and I think we each came away with different perspectives, but grounded on the same understanding and even more enthusiasm for what's ahead. So Denker, I always think about you, as you mentioned, you were OG marketplace advocate before it was cool. I remember those early days. Not everybody loved the marketplace idea, but I just, having met with you in Vegas, I know your calendar was super full. You had a lot of meetings with the partnership leadership team at Google Cloud and marketplace teams. You're meeting with your big customers and other partners, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe just kick us off. What are your, what was the theme in the leadership rooms in these meetings, or your big takeaways?
Well, I'll tell you what the theme was not. It was sleep. So I did not sleep much. It is Vegas. You're running tip to tail every single day. I think we can all agree with that. So outside of getting any sort of rest or anything there, we had 32 meetings, 17 customers, 13 prospects, and met with Google a couple times too. So in 2.5 days, that was pretty awesome, right? And just getting to tap in. I mean, obviously Tackle's got a pretty big spread. We go over 500 customers and, tons of Google stuff. And, so we just had a lot of people we were chatting about, but really we were talking about kind of three main concepts across everybody, which is crazy, things that were different. We think about where marketplace was back in the day. AWS kind of created in 2016. Azure actually followed soon after, and then Google soon. I think it was 2019 when Google's first SaaS listing came alive, and actually Tackle, little known fact, Tackle was the first production SaaS listing on Google Marketplace, which was kind of cool. Kind of drove that from the very beginning. We're still super involved with those guys. But, I think in the early days, people thought it was just going to, it was going to make everything easy. It was going to disrupt the channel. It was going to disrupt disties. It was going to do all that stuff. And what I'm realizing now is people are saying this ecosystem is pretty well here to stay. And so a couple of highlights, things, a lot of stuff talking about Google released Marketplace Channel Private Offers about 6-8 months ago, last July. And, MCPO it's called. And so lots of people were asking us, how do we manage this? How do we deal with MCPO? There's a lot of little tricks to it. Google's done some stuff with resellers, two-tier kind of sales. A lot of people trying to understand more about MCPO, and we could have a whole conversation on that alone, right? But channel is top of mind. Channel is not going away. Channel is being built into the marketplace process. I think that's pretty cool. right? Another thing that's kind of happening is was led by AWS in the early days with their ACE, Amazon customer engagement product, but this whole idea of a three-party sale, right? It's an ISV trying to sell to a buyer. And if we're going to sell it via the cloud, why don't we loop in the cloud representative, right? And so, Google is just right now releasing their deal reg, which has got some APIs around it. And so you can actually register deals. By registering deals, you can actually find out who on Google is the responsible party for that end customer. You can kind of put together a tri-party sale. Everybody get comped. It's actually a pretty cool thing. So lots of people are like, how do I do the deal reg? How do I co-sell? What do I do? And then that becomes down. We all know, everybody went a little bananas in 2021 into 2022, spending way too much money, hiring way too many people, us included. Now we're like in this world of efficiency, and it's even getting ground out more with AI, which is great. But like, how do we be more efficient, right? Do I want to just register every single deal that's out there? Do I want to throw everything against the wall? Like, how do I drive efficacy through my sales team, with Marketplace and this co-sell without being too noisy? So big themes there. We've got great answers and discussion topics on all that stuff, but I'd say those were really big themes, like channel, co-sell, deal reg, and driving efficiency through the sales team, because just everybody's trying to do more with less, right? So.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think in I'll comment on this after maybe we hear from Amin. But before we turn it over, one of the things that really struck me was one of the marketplace sessions in the partner summit area, or lounge, depending on who you're talking to, which is really hard to find for me at first, but figured it out.
Yeah,
Mandalay Bay
down there
is a guy who's been, dozens and dozens of conferences at another place. I did not like Mandalay Bay. It was like the logistics were a pain in the ass. But you mentioned two things that I saw combined together in this breakout session, which I thought was really interesting, and talked to the product manager after it. This little line item on the slide brought together the focus on channel that you mentioned and the focus on the deal registration process. And it said coming this year, but for resellers only, when you register that deal, you're going to get some indication of a commit. Very similar to what you can get on Microsoft. So I thought that was really interesting. And I talked to this woman about, well, how about for the ISV? And she's like, oh, well, haven't thought about that yet. I'm like, maybe think about that. So anyways, yeah. So I think it was an interesting conversation. I think to me, everything is super fluid, and maybe I'll just keep the floor for now for my top three, because it seems like we've made a lot of progress, like across all ecosystems, but certainly in Google Cloud, and the investments that they've made over the last 3 years in particular, in my mind, really stand out. And the way I explain my enthusiasm for supporting Google Cloud Motion is because I feel like the last 3 years, particularly as Dai has come on board and really led it, it's like, here's what we're going to do. Then a year later, it's like, okay, here's what we've done. Now here's what we're going to do. Fast forward another year, it's like, here's what we've done. And so they've continuously delivered on their promises. And I think that continues. And I'm excited for what they've talked about this year, including that new feature that I just spoke about. But for me, I'd say that was the biggest observation is, the 5 sales priorities as I've found them. Maybe I'll just focus on those because that's where I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about it. And the focus areas that I heard are really conducive to this cloud go-to-market motion through Google Cloud Marketplace. It's unlocking the channel. They're expanding the offerings. Like the big thing that I think those of us that do provide professional services are excited about is, beginning with late last year, the announcement of services listing coming, the listing type, that is here, is one might imagine. That services listing type is pretty much oriented around services delivery of first party services and maybe like, best practices and cost benefit analysis and things like this. So it's not really suited to like practice that Amin, you and I are accustomed to doing, where we work with ISVs and partners to achieve more. And they're not tightly coupled to the go-to-market motion, but I think that's interesting. Harnessing the power of data and AI. Google Cloud came out with a new data listing type, but just data and AI. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves. There's already 50 ISV partners or different partner types actually that have published these already. It's going to be really interesting seeing how these AI capabilities are coupled with data sets and then applied in the context of a particular ISV product or maybe a bundle of products. So I think that's going to be really interesting. The fourth theme was driving go-to-market strategies, and a lot of really good guidance came out of the marketplace. The partnership sessions, including the keynote, which really kind of, I think, leans toward maybe a different type of scoring of how different partner types are doing. So those of you that might be interested in the professional services listing, there's a new registration process for you to register where you're helping with services drive outcomes with Google Cloud. So keep an eye out for that. And then the last one is just this big broad bucket of accelerating time to value. But for me, walking out of that, I was really excited to hear big bets being made into programs and resources designed to accelerate a co-sell motion and to accelerate volume through Google Cloud Marketplace. So for me, those were my big takeaways.
That's
so I don't know. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot. Like you said earlier, Tinker, we could probably spend a whole hour on that, but I don't want to take any more time. Like, I mean, I know you and I ran parallel paths, a lot of the same things, but obviously mostly different. So what were your big takeaways from Google Cloud Next?
I think it's a matter of perspective. It's not so much different than what both of you mentioned. I think looking at it, there's two different perspectives that you can kind of take. There's a perspective of, from the ISV, there's a perspective of from the channel partner, be a reseller, distributor, whomever, right? Those are some of the elements of how I think it's the appropriate way to look at everything that kind of rolled out during Next. So when I think about it, it's like certainly one of the biggest themes, right, is going to be maturity, marketplace maturity. And Google doesn't have a choice. When you look at where they sit in the market and you look at AWS and you look at Microsoft, if they are to claw back market share and expand their reach, ultimately, they have to be more mature with the programs that they offer. They have to be consistent with those programs. They have to be transparent with those programs. And they have to present those programs in a way that demonstrates an amount of consistency, for all of the partner types that are going to be doing business with and through Google. So I think that wraps up a lot of what you guys were talking about. And it's one of the things that I saw. One of the things that I think is super interesting, especially when you start working with Google a lot or Microsoft or AWS, right? I know we're Google centric here, but when you talk to those guys, the deal of it is that they're all kind of similar until you start working with them, and they're all like fundamentally different with different personalities. It's like having kids, right? It's like, yeah, they're all mine, sure, but they all have their very unique personalities that you have to parent them through. So says the guy without kids.
That is an awesome analogy. I mean, seriously, they're like three different kids. You love them all, but they are so different. They get moody at different times. They get emotional. Oh my gosh, that's so
different things, right? Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's so interesting about Google in the sense of they're the world's honestly, they're one of the world's biggest startups. So when you get inside and you start working with them, what you realize is that they still operate largely from this mode of like a really large startup. So do they have operational processes? Sure. Are those operational processes probably a little more siloed than what you would think they would be? Yeah, they are. And does that show up, let's say negatively or positively, or does it just show up for partners? Yeah, it does. And I think where it shows up for partners, especially with the marketplace, is things like exposing the appropriate APIs so you can build the appropriate connectors between not only your marketplace automation platform, right, but also your CRM in that case. And I think that is where you start really when you're an ISV, or, and you're looking at like, okay, I'm going to make a decision to go with Tackle. Like that's one of the pieces that you really start thinking about, like, oh, this is why I'm evaluating Tackle for this type of functionality, so I can do X more efficiently and more seamlessly. That's part of that decision tree. I think the other thing that I just wanted to touch on too is when you think about, this professional listing, professional services, the piece of it is that, yeah, sure, you have professional services, but how does an ISV then create a professional services listing that is adjacent to their software, their SaaS listing? That is like the arc of connection between the multi-tiers. You have your distributors, you have your VARs, right? Which we kind of say, but we don't say a lot of. And then you have your ISVs that are going to offer professional services. And this goes back, Brian, to what you were saying earlier, where it's like, wait a minute, is this disruptive? Well, maybe it's disruptive, maybe it's not, but it's part of understanding the fact that in certain cases, there can be elements of professional services that ISVs are going to deliver that are going to be similar, but maybe a little bit different than the value that VARs can deliver. And that's that transparency.
And the holy grail is putting those together in a bundle, which nobody's really been able to do. So that's not 4 different private offers. It's like, man, how do you bundle a private offer to be an outcome and not a product or a service alone, right? I mean, man, that is the holy grail that they're all working towards, right?
Well, before you get into that, one of the things I just want to touch on is like the other piece of that too is, you hit the nail on the head. It's the complexity of that. You have the technical complexity, and then you have the economic complexity. And I think one of the pieces of that is, how do you get, if you're an ISV, holy grail, like how do you get your software on a Google SKU so that sellers get compensated and you reduce all the economic complexity, that are from your customer, right?
Totally. That triggers a thought that we should shift over to, which is out of as much progress as we just talked about, that not only Google Cloud has made in this space, this cloud go-to-market space, but the entire industry has advanced by leaps and bounds since my early days, which were the 2018, 2019 timeframe. So we should spend a minute talking about like our 101s. But before we do that, I want to go back to your comment, Denker, real quickly on just outcomes. So what are the breakout sessions, the marketplace breakout sessions? One of the marketplace leaders, I'll leave it at that, said on stage, it's like an objective that we have is that I want to take marketplace from basically where you go to procure solutions to where you go procure outcomes. And I followed up after the session and I said, so what do you really mean by that? I love the idea. And it seems like super early. So I mean, going to your point, and I agree with you, Google is the world's largest startup, and they admittedly operate that way. And I love it. It's fail fast. It's just let's just try something. If it doesn't work, we recap, and it gets a little bumpy, a little turbulent, but it's a great way to start. So maybe we kind of wrap by taking a few minutes on maybe what are those top 3 like must-do things that we would guide, let's just keep it simple, an ISV to do, and maybe your top things, frame it if it's something oriented toward like a growth emerging smaller company that definitely is going to look and feel different than a large enterprise technology company that's really rotating from maybe decades of partnership and channels into this cloud go-to-market motion. So I don't know, maybe Denker, we start with you again, and I don't know if you were to guide an executive at a company and you frame what it is, what are the top 2 things, 3 things that you'd say you absolutely must do these things?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, this depends on a lot of, I was having a lot of chats with folks that are super mature, like Wiz, who they're like, how do I scale? I'm already doing hundreds of millions through the marketplace. How do I go do $1 billion through the marketplace? That's a super different conversation than a conversation that I had yesterday where it's like, I'm a healthcare provider. I sell to hospitals. Supposedly, I should be doing this marketplace thing. I don't even know what it is, right? Like, these are really different conversations. And I guess that's kind of the proof to why this is so tricky. Because, if you're something that's near infrastructure, your database, your BI, your DevOps tools, you've been doing marketplace forever. And if you you don't have a cloud marketplace first strategy to begin with out of that as a cloud SaaS product, I mean, you're like already miles behind. And I think most leading tools are there, right? But if you're like biz apps, if you sell to the CMO, if you sell to strategy officers, other things, that's changing quite a bit. And like there's still, I wouldn't say there's maybe first mover advantage, but there's early mover advantage there, right? I do think when people relook at these commits and they're looking at, you know, these kind of large Google commits or any cloud commits, they're now making them more company wide, right? They're saying, we spend $10 million in software. What if we could put 5 million of that through the marketplace? And then we can get a better deal on all of our infrastructure costs as well. And so there's like a massive change in all of that. But if I was to kind of boil that down a little bit, I think, you know, a couple of the things that are super duper important, like if you're just getting started, it's like absolutely getting like the executive buy-in. Like this can't be something. And 5 years ago, you could have an alliance manager that just kind of push this through, check some boxes, get some partnership levels. Like that really doesn't work at scale anymore, right? You've got to actually move through. I love the little fingers right on.
I see people doing that all the time. I had to figure out where that is.
I was like, oh, look at that. There we go. Love is in the air, man.
But that's so true. No, it's so true.
Anyway, yeah, it's just like driving that kind of like whole company exec buy-in. Like you've got to have a strategy for it. You can't just say, let's get listed and go do a couple co-sales to get this one deal through, right? You've got to go do that. So it's like exec enablement and then buy-in and across. And I guess the other thing that people don't necessarily realize is like the biggest roadblock to a successful kind of cloud go-to-market system is like ops, right? The biggest person that can throw the gigantic red X is like your CFO and your RevOps person that says, whoa. You're telling me I don't need a signed order form. You're telling me I don't need a purchase order. You're telling me I don't send an invoice. Like none of this makes any sense to me. And I've been doing finance for 30 years. Like this is crazy, right? And so you've got to make sure you enable across all the levels, right? Because if you go shove 5 deals through the system and then finance shows up and you didn't bring them along for the ride, they're like, dude, WTH, like this doesn't work, right? I can't do this, right? So yeah, just kind of pulling all that stuff together, which has been really kind of interesting. But you know, that's you know, kind of when I think of like where it is now versus where it was, right? You know,
yeah.
So.
Totally agree. You took 2 of mine already, which but I totally agree with. I mean, those are the things, and it's amazing to me how few companies that I come across, both large and small, don't have that leadership alignment and revenue ops understanding. So it's almost FUD, you know, when you get to the ops and the CFO level, you know, unless you articulate it in advance. So I mean, what would you guide? You know, an ISV or whoever, define whoever you're talking to. What are the top couple things, 3 things that you think they absolutely need to do to be successful with Google Cloud?
Exactly, like 2 more hours, because like the list is like right.
Yeah, 72 things, right? Yeah.
I think the first one, maybe, you know, tagging on, you know, Brian, what you said earlier, is like this doesn't work if it's a pet project. It just doesn't work, you know, it can't work. It doesn't scale, you know, and to your point, you'll run into roadblocks along the way, and who pays the price? There's 2 people who pay the price. End customers pay the price, right? But then also too, your sales team pays the price, because they're gonna be like, dude, this is way too complex. I'm not even going to touch it. And we know sales guys, as soon as it even sounds different,
like sniff any sort of like, yeah, dude, totally.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not letting anybody into my deal. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then another point too is like when you think about bringing along, you know, finance and folks like that, there's another piece that's really super important, and that's comp neutrality. You know, like when you talk about sales, you got to make sure that your guys are whole, because if they're going to take a hit on what their quota looks like, they are actively going to sell against it, and they're going to give you lip service. I'm like, oh yeah, marketplaces, I'll sell it, and they're going to be like, no, I'm not, because it hits my wallet. So when you think about alignment, it's, yes, the umbrella of alignment is incredibly important, but the specifics of alignment are absolutely, you have to be lined up on certain things like comp neutrality. The other piece of it too is this starts, I think it's before you even decide which marketplace you're going to jump into. Like these are like like marketplace oriented conversations. You gotta crunch the numbers. You gotta know the data. Like, where do your customers even live? Where are their commits? What is that ICP? Is it is your ICP an organization that has a ton of infrastructure on AWS, but then they are bought in on GWS with their collaboration and productivity? What is it that they're trying typically to do, right? These are the things that make a decision of not necessarily you saying like, I'm all in on Google or I'm all in on AWS, but it comes down to how you are going to prioritize which marketplace that you're going to get into first. Because if you try and hit both of them simultaneously, it's a lose-lose. You don't have the resources.
You can't bite off all three at once and hope to be successful at all.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I totally agree, and I think I'll throw in a few observations, and I'll start with the way I look at prospective companies that want to work with me and I want to work with, and I really have three really firm rules that I follow quite rigorously. And I'll start with the third one because it ties on to what you were just saying. I mean, and the first one is there's a better together story that's good and real. And really what that means is that company I'm talking to, they're spending on Google already. That's the best way to describe it. And a lot of companies do talk about, and you just alluded to this, which is something you still do, is like, where are your customers? It's easier for a software vendor to identify or answer that question if you're in that first wave of segments that really adopted cloud go-to-market motion. Think cloud infrastructure services, think security, someone who's selling into the IT shop. So it's a very natural conversation to have. Now, where it gets more complicated is with this rapid acceleration of business applications through marketplace, because now you have different personas. So there's a lot of opportunity to muddy the water here, but I start with better together story because that is the foundation of your co-sell message. That's the foundation of your customer message. That's the foundation that grounds your sellers as well about why this is the best thing ever because of this story. So that's my third one, which I'll say first. And the other two I feel really strongly with, and I think it encapsulates what both of you have said. And the first thing is leadership commitment to the particular cloud. Presumably that means alignment, but that is not often the case as well. So I view them as differently, but at the leadership level and perhaps the board level, they're making a bet on growing more with that particular cloud, with Google Cloud. And so that just means you have that backing, which you will need on the governance. And speaking to governance and support, my leader on that leadership team, this is my third, which begins with my one, is the CRO, whoever runs revenue, whoever's the leadership member that runs revenue. You need their support to be successful. So I guess those are the things that are most important from my perspective. So moving along, we're just over our TED Talk time, but we can't end this without mentioning, what do we think is coming ahead? And freaking AI, oh my God, it's everywhere. And so I think, for me, what's coming ahead is more and more of these agent to agent activities. So I'm jumping ahead, not even saying like, well, you should be using ChatGPT or you should be building things with Vertex or Gemini and things like that and work those into your workflow. I'm even talking about agent to agent, which was another big announcement that Google Cloud made last week. So that's really what I see happening immediately. Is a lot of these workflows being supported by agentic systems. And we're seeing that with the innovations coming out of the marketplaces. We're seeing this with this emerging set of providers as well, go-to-market AI systems. So I think that's one thing to keep a lookout. So Amin, what would you say to look, what's on your mind when you say, okay, well, what do you see coming in the next, well, let's just leave it to 12 months because so much is going to happen in the next 12.
I'm going to keep mine just super, super tight and be super simple and super selfish with it. I think as an alliance person, I want efficiency, and efficiency that helps me to keep my eyes outside of the business. I think that and that's what I'm looking for when I look at, how am I going to apply AI? There's so many places I mean, honestly, it's endless. But where I see the biggest bang for my buck is how do I automate my day and myself and all of the internal interactions in terms of deal management, relationship management between myself and my representatives at, pick a cloud, cloud provider, right? How do I automate that so I can look and strategize about everything that's going on outside the business? I think that's the number one thing. And I say that because I think there's a majority and I love someone to prove me wrong. So I think the majority of ISVs, if we look at, sub 200 million, right? I think most of the time you're looking at organizations that are probably like alliance organizations that are like maybe 2 people, right?
Yeah. Trying to get all this stuff done, representing 20-30% of the business, right? Revenue and all that.
100%. Yeah, and establish a scalable and reasonable go-to-market with all the new initiatives about always looking out and saying, okay, well, how does this align? How do we sell through and with?
Yeah,
that's huge.
That is huge.
That is huge efficiency, man.
The digital assistant that I first heard Jay McBain mention, I think in early 23, maybe, but it might have even been earlier. But yeah, and that's real. Like that is those capabilities are available today. So, all right, Dinker, let's close out with you. Like, what's
well, I mean, I'll keep something a little bit different, which I see coming and I see happening a lot. I mean, AI is big. What efficiency? I mean, I think there's a fundamental change that's going to come somewhere in the next 12 to 24 months around the way people find. And so we're doing a ton of work around storefronts and kind of connecting buyers with a more efficient way to find software and outcomes together. And, I think the utopian world for the clouds is, I'm going to go to Google Cloud Marketplace. I'm going to go into the security category and I'm going to go find something. I think that is a failed belief, and I think everybody's kind of starting to realize that. And so they're kind of creating APIs, they're kind of creating structures. I'm super excited about what Tackle's doing along the storefront side of things. And we've kind of created this beta version of Tackle Pay, which pulls it all together. And it's we can create essentially curated marketplaces for enterprises, right? And I think that is coming soon, where all this stuff happens, whether it's on the website, it's a PLG motion that kind of builds and they go through. I think there's going to be a fundamentally different entry point into the marketplace purchase, right? I really do think that, currently it gets kind of it's like a redheaded stepchild, where it's you do the whole deal, you negotiate it, and then you shove marketplace in at the end. I really think there's going to be some cool stuff happening with how storefronts drive people into the marketplace and into the outcomes in a different way, whether it's through PLG, through storefronts, through multiple ways to pay, and marketplace becomes the preferred commerce engine, but it's built around a wider framework. So I think there's cool stuff coming with that. Yeah.
I agree. So I say we wrap. I mean, this was a lot of fun. Whether we record this and publish it again, I don't know. But I tell you what, the 3 of us.
I always love talking this stuff with my friends. It's great.
Shoot the shit over coffee. And we're just to see how this stuff plays out over the next year. All right, guys. It's been great seeing you.
John. I always appreciate it, buddy. It's always good to chat. Absolutely.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Cheers. Have a great day.
You too. See you guys.
All right. Bye.